This necklace. Where did you get it?" The mafia boss shouts at the waitress. The air in Gino's trattoria hung thick with the smell of stale garlic, sour wine, and the sharp chemical tang of industrial bleach. Lily Martin dragged a damp rag over the last laminate tabletop, her reflection staring back at her from the streaked, dark surface, a pale, hollow-eyed ghost she barely recognized. 12 hours, another 12-hour shift, bleeding into the gray, pre-dawn light of Port Veritas. Her feet, encased in worn-out sneakers, didn't just ache. They throbbed with a dull, distant pulse, a rhythm that matched the humming of the ancient Coke machine in the corner. This was her life, a grueling, endless loop of survival. Gino squatted near the docks, a place of transients, sailors, and men who kept their hats low and their voices lower. Lily moved among them with a quiet, practiced efficiency that broadcast one clear message: leave me alone. She was known here, but not known well. She was a quiet girl, the hard-working girl, the one who never spoke about her life, who never smiled, who just took the double shifts no one else wanted. She stacked the heavy, chipped plates, her movements economical, betraying none of the bone-deep exhaustion that settled into her marrow. She was private, she was focused, and she was so very, very tired. The money was all that mattered. Every damp dollar, every meager tip, went into a scarred envelope tucked under her mattress. It was for her mother, for the medication that kept the pain at bay, for the rent on their tiny, damp apartment, for the hope that one day this wouldn't be all there was. "You're still here. Tesoro?" Lily startled, her hand tightening on the rag. Maria bustled out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron that had seen better decades. Maria, in her 60s. With eyes that held the kindness of 1,000 sorrows and joints that ached with every coastal storm, was the only warmth in Gino's. "Just finishing up. Maria," Lily murmured, her voice rough from disuse. "You work too hard. A girl your age, it's not right." Maria clicked her tongue, her gaze softening. "Wait, before you go, I was sorting the donation boxes at St. Jude's this afternoon. It's too beautiful to be lost in a box of old clothes." Maria fumbled in her apron pocket and pulled out a necklace. It wasn't flashy, not glittering with cheap rhinestones, but it was unique. A small, intricately worked silver locket, shaped almost like a teardrop, hung from a delicate, surprisingly sturdy chain. The silver had a heavy, antique patina, as if it held stories. "Maria, I can't," Lily started, already calculating the minutes to the bus, the long ride home, the check-in on her mother. "Nonsense. It's not a handout, it's a finding." Maria pressed it into Lily's hand. The metal was heavy, cool, and smooth against her calloused skin. It looked like it was meant for you. "Go on." "A little beauty doesn't hurt." To appease her, Lily fastened it around her neck. The locket settled into the hollow of her throat, a small, cool weight against her skin. It was hidden, for a moment, by the cheap material of her uniform. "Thank you, Maria," Lily said, the words genuine. She didn't own a single nice thing, not one. She offered Maria a rare, quick smile and turned to clock out. The necklace was forgotten 5 seconds later, her mind already on the 3-block walk to the bus stop, her hand tightening on the pepper spray in her pocket. She had made it as far as the door, her thin coat pulled tight, when the owner's voice barked across the empty diner. "Martin, where do you think you're going?" Lily froze, her hand on the door. Sal, a man whose mood soured with the daily specials, stalked out from the back office, a cigarillo clamped in his teeth. "My shift is over, Sal. It's 6:30 in the morning." "Not anymore." Davis called out. "Pneumonia," he grunted, clearly annoyed by the inconvenience. "You're covering the dinner rush. Be back at 5. Lily's stomach turned to ice. "Sal, I can't. I've been here 12 hours. My mother. I don't care about your mother," he snapped, jabbing the cigarillo at her. "I care about tables that need waiting. You want this job? You'll be here at 5. If not, don't bother coming back at all." The panic of losing the job was a sharper, more immediate threat than the exhaustion. Her mother's prescription was due. Lily nodded, her throat tight. "I'll be here." She went home. slept for 6 hours that felt like 6 minutes, cared for her mother with a gentle efficiency that belied her own desperation, and was back at Gino's by 5 o'clock. She pulled on a fresh, in-name-only apron, the silver locket from Maria now resting on the outside of the drab gray uniform. It was the only spot of light on her. The 6 o'clock lull was shattered by the bell over the door. It didn't just chime, it announced the diner, half full of clattering forks and the low mumble of dock workers, went quiet. Not just quiet, silent, the kind of silence that creeps up your spine. Lily, balancing 3 plates of spaghetti on her arm, looked up. 3 men stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the fading light. They wore suits so black and so perfectly tailored they seemed to suck the very light out of the greasy diner. The 2 on the flanks were mountains, their faces impassive, their eyes hidden behind dark glasses, scanning the room with a predatory stillness. The man in the middle was the reason the room had stopped breathing. He was tall, with broad shoulders that the expensive suit only emphasized. His black hair was cut short, precise, revealing the hard, unforgiving line of his jaw. His face was all harsh angles and controlled shadows, a face that looked carved from unforgiving stone, handsome in a way that was terrifying. He didn't look at the menu board. He didn't look for a table. His eyes, cold and dark as the Port Veritas harbor at midnight, swept the room once, dismissing everything and everyone in it, until they landed on her. Marco DeLuca did not visit places like Gino's Trattoria. He didn't eat dinner. He didn't breathe stale air. He was here for a quick, dirty meeting with a contact on neutral ground, a transaction he wanted off his books, but the meeting was forgotten. Everything was forgotten. He saw the girl, a slip of a thing, pale, exhausted, lost in a cheap uniform. And then he saw what was hanging around her neck. Time stopped. The clatter of the kitchen, the buzz of the neon sign, the very thrum of his own blood. It all ceased. He felt the air leave his lungs in a sharp, painful rush. It was impossible. It was a ghost. It was a lie. His legs moved before his mind did, carrying him across the cracked linoleum, his 2 guards moving in silent, perfect sync behind him. He stopped 3 feet from her. She flinched, the plates in her hand rattling, marinara slopping onto the tray. He wasn't looking at her face. He was staring at the small, silver teardrop locket, the locket his father had commissioned from a master in Sicily, the locket he himself, a boy of 15, had fastened around his baby sister's neck. Her 5-year-old giggles echoing in the nursery, just an hour before she was taken. His breath hitched. The iron control he lived by, the cold, hard discipline that defined the DeLuca empire, shattered into a million pieces. His voice, when it came out, wasn't the measured baritone of a boss. It was a raw, shaking rasp, loud enough to make the entire diner jump. This necklace. He pointed a finger, his hand trembling with a violence he hadn't felt in 20 years. Where did you get it? The question hung in the air like a gunshot. Lily stared, her blood turning to ice. This wasn't a customer. This was dangerous, pure and elemental. Am I sorry? She stammered, the plates trembling. I don't understand. The necklace, he shouted, taking another step. The sudden movement made her cringe, and the plates slipped. They shattered on the floor, a mess of pasta, red sauce, and broken ceramic. Oh, God, I'm sorry, I'll clean it up. Lily dropped to her knees, her hands shaking as she tried to gather the sharp pieces. To hell with the plates, he roared, looming over her. Answer me. Tears of panic and humiliation stung her eyes. This was a nightmare. She was going to be fired or arrested. She fumbled at her neck, her fingers clumsy and shaking. It was a gift. I can give it to you. I don't want it. I'm sorry, sir. She was trying to unhook the clasp, frantic, pulling at the chain. She thought he was angry about the necklace, that she had stolen it, that it belonged to his wife. Don't touch it, he commanded. Who gave it to you? I don't know. She cried, the sob tearing from her throat. She looked past him, to the kitchen, to Sal, to anyone, desperate. She scrambled to her feet and made a move to run, a rabbit bolting for a hole. The man to Marco's left, Antonio, simply moved. He was 6'5" and built of granite. He didn't reach for her, didn't threaten. He just occupied the space between her and the kitchen. A human blockade. Lily slammed to a halt, a small, choked sound escaping her. She backed away, her body hitting the diner's pie display with a thud, rattling the plastic covers. And it was in that moment, seeing her trapped between his man and the glass, that Marco's rage evaporated, replaced by a sudden, jarring clarity. He saw her, not as a clue, not as a thief, but as a person. She was painfully thin, the bones of her collar visible and sharp above the gray uniform. There were dark, bruised circles under her eyes, the kind that didn't come from one long night, but from 1,000 of them. She was shaking so hard the pie display was rattling. She was terrified, and she had no idea why. Marco held up a hand. "Antonio, back up!" The big man retreated a step. Marco's voice, when he spoke again, was low, controlled, but vibrating with an intensity that was almost worse than the shout. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not angry with you." He took a breath. "I just need to know, where... Did you get it? The necklace. What's going on here?" Sal came storming out of the back, his face red from the kitchen's heat. "She broke those plates? That's coming out of your pay, Lily, and what are you doing, bothering my customers?" He tried to shove past her, to placate the man in the suit. Marco put a hand on Sal's chest. Not a push, just a placement. Sal froze, as if the hand weighed 500 pounds. "She is coming with me," Marco said, his voice flat. "We are going to have a private conversation." "The hell she is," Sal blustered, though his voice was a few octaves higher. "She's on shift. You can't just—" Marco's eyes, black and depthless, met Sal's. He didn't say a word. He didn't threaten. He just looked. The air crackled with a power Sal understood instantly, the power of predator and prey. Sal's bravado wilted like lettuce under a heat lamp. He licked his lips and visibly shrank. "Right," Sal squeaked. He turned to Lily, avoiding her eyes, his face pale. "Lily, you heard the man. Go cooperate with the customer. Take your break." Lily looked at Sal, her expression crumbling. He was feeding her to the wolves to save his own skin. The betrayal was sharp, but horribly, terribly familiar. "Please," Marco said, the words sounding foreign and rough from his lips. He motioned to the door. Lily, trapped, could only nod. She walked, her feet leaden, her legs made of wood. She moved past the staring, silent customers, past Maria, who was watching from the kitchen window with a hand pressed over her mouth. Marco followed a step behind, his men fanning out around them, a phalanx of black wool. The night air was cold. It hit Lily's face, but she couldn't feel it. Her blood was too loud in her ears. A black car, a sedan so long and sleek it looked like a panther waiting to pounce, was idling at the curb. Antonio opened the back door. "I'm not going to hurt you," Marco said again, his voice softer now, almost frustrated. "I give you my word. I just need answers." Lily looked at the dark, yawning interior of the car. She looked at the men. She had no choice. She slid in. He followed, sitting opposite her on the plush leather bench seat. The door closed with a heavy, final thunk, sealing them in. The silence inside was absolute, thick. It smelled of rich leather, expensive cologne, and something metallic, like power. "My name is Marco DeLuca," he said. The name meant nothing to Lily. She just stared at her hands, which were twisting in her lap, red and raw from the bleach water. 20 years ago," he continued, his voice tight, as if the words were being physically pulled from him. "My little sister, Lena, was kidnapped from our home. She was 5 years old. We never saw her again. The police, my father's men, everyone we looked for years." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. All traces of coldness gone, replaced by a burning, desperate hunger. "When she was taken," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "she was wearing that necklace. My father had it made for her. There is not another one like it in the world." Lily's head snapped up, her own fear eclipsed by the profound, blank confusion of his story. "What? I want the truth. Who gave it to you? Did you buy it? Did you find it?" "No," she said, her voice small but finding its strength. "It was a gift. This morning." And she told him. The truth. It was all she had. "My friend, Maria, works in the kitchen. She volunteers at a church, St. Jude's, over on the east side. She said she found it in a box of donated clothes. She said it was too nice to be lost." Lily was speaking fast, the words tumbling out. Her eyes locked on his. "She gave it to me, just this morning, before my shift. I swear, I've never seen it before in my life. I didn't know. I swear on my mother's life, I didn't know." She was breathing hard, her eyes wide and honest. Marco watched her. He had built an empire on reading people. He knew the tells of a liar, the shifting eyes, the tremor in the voice, the sweat, the overeager protestations. This was not that. This was raw, unadulterated, innocent confusion. The girl didn't have a devious bone in her body. She was just scared. The necklace wasn't a clue. It was an accident, a ghost. "She's not lying, boss," Antonio said quietly from the front seat. Marco hadn't realized he'd been listening. He nodded slowly, the adrenaline draining away, leaving him with a familiar, hollow ache. He'd been so close. For one blinding, impossible second, he'd thought it didn't matter what he thought. The trail was cold again. He leaned back against the leather, the fire in his eyes banked, leaving only embers. He looked tired. "I believe you," he said. He scrubbed a hand over his face. "I'm sorry. I frightened you." It was an apology, and it sounded like it cost him. He nodded to Antonio. "Let her go." But as Lily reached for the handle, her hand clumsy in her haste, he stopped her. "Wait." She froze. He watched her, a calculating look returning, but different. It wasn't about his past. It was about her present. He'd seen the way Sal treated her. He knew this neighborhood. He had brought a storm to her doorstep, and he couldn't just walk away. "That necklace," he said, his voice quiet. "The men my father fought, the ones who would have taken my sister, are still out there. They are a different family. If that necklace surfaced, and they knew it, they might think you're connected. They might think you know something." "But I don't," she whispered, her hand flying to her throat, to the locket. It felt heavy now, dangerous. "I know," he said, "but men like that don't ask questions the way I do." He pulled a thick black card from the inside pocket of his jacket. It was heavy cardstock, with no name, no business, just a single line of digits embossed in stark silver. He took her hand. Her skin was cold, her fingers rough from work. He folded her hand around the card, his grip firm. "If anything happens," he said, his voice a low command. "Anything. A strange car on your street, a knock on your door. If that weasel in the diner looks at you wrong, you call this number. Do you understand me?" Lily could only nod, her throat thick with a fear she couldn't even name. "I'm serious," he said, his dark eyes holding hers, pulling her into their depths. "Call me." He nodded to Antonio. The door lock clicked open. Lily scrambled out of the car, sucking in the cold, diesel-fumed air as if it were the first breath of her life. She didn't look back as the black sedan pulled away, its engine a low, menacing growl that disappeared into the Port Veritas night. She stood on the curb for a full minute, her body shaking, before she ran the 3 blocks to the bus stop, the heavy card clutched in her hand, and the silver locket suddenly feeling like a millstone around her neck. The bus ride home was a blur of gray streets and rattling windows. Lily's mind was a frantic cassette tape, replaying the encounter in the black car, the man's haunted eyes, the impossible story of a lost sister, and the cold, heavy weight of the card in her pocket. She had shoved the necklace under her shirt, the silver now feeling like a brand against her skin. She was exhausted, but a new, sharper kind of fear had cut through the fatigue. She trudged up the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, the smell of mildew and boiled cabbage clinging to the air. The deadbolt on her door was stiff. As always, she put her key in, turned, and the door swung open on its own. A cold dread, sharper than the harbor wind, washed over her. She hadn't left it open. She never left it open. "Mom?" she called out, her voice a thin thread. Silence. She pushed the door wide. The single-room apartment was a vortex of destruction. It wasn't just messy, it was violated. The threadbare sofa was overturned, its stuffing pulled out like grotesque entrails. The small laminate table was flipped, its contents scattered, but it was the back corner, her mother's corner, that made Lily's heart stop. The mattress was thrown against the wall, the small, rickety nightstand was splintered, and the wheelchair was on its side, one wheel spinning lazily in the air. "Mom!" Lily screamed, scrambling over the wreckage. Her mother, Eleanor, was crumpled on the floor between the wall and the overturned mattress. She was a frail woman, her body made brittle by a disease that had stolen her legs and was slowly stealing her strength. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the ceiling, her breath coming in shallow, hitching gasps. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Mom, are you okay?" Lily fell to her knees, her hands hovering, afraid to touch her, afraid of what might be broken. Eleanor's eyes flickered, finding her daughter. A small, dry sob escaped her. "Lily, they were looking for something." Her voice was a cracked whisper. "I told them we had nothing. I told them. Did they hurt you? Mom, did they touch you?" Lily's hands were shaking as she ran them gently over her mother's arms and legs. No, they just threw me. They were angry." Relief, so potent it made Lily dizzy, warred with a rising tide of icy rage. She helped her mother sit up, propping her against the mattress. Eleanor was unharmed, but she was terrified, her body trembling with a bone-deep shock. Lily's eyes scanned the room, the destruction finally coming into focus. Her gaze landed on the splintered nightstand, the orange plastic bottles. They were gone, all of them. "The medication," Lily breathed, the words punched out of her. "They took it all." Eleanor wept. "They took the pills, Lily, all of them, even the emergency ones." This was worse than violence. This was a death sentence. The medication was the only thing that managed Eleanor's chronic, agonizing pain. It was the only thing that kept her system from shutting down. She had maybe 12 hours, less, before the withdrawal and the pain became critical. Okay. Lily forced her own panic down, her voice becoming a steel rod. "I'm calling the police. I'm going to fix this. Just breathe. Mom, I'm here now." She dug her cheap phone from her pocket, her fingers slipping on the screen. She dialed 911. The police took 45 minutes. 2 officers, one old and weary, one young and bored, stepped just inside the doorway, their expressions flat. They didn't even bother to take out their notebooks. "So, you were robbed," the older one said, his gaze sweeping the room with profound disinterest. "They overturned my mother. They stole her prescription medication. It's vital. She needs it," Lily explained, her voice shaking with the effort of holding it together. The younger officer nudged a broken picture frame with his boot. "Looks like junkies," he pronounced. "They were looking for pills. It's this neighborhood. Happens all the time. They'll sell 'em. Shoot 'em up. They're long gone." "But what am I supposed to do?" Lily pleaded. "The pharmacy won't refill a stolen prescription this early. Not without a police report. She's going to be in so much pain." The older officer sighed, finally pulling out his pad. "Look, miss, we'll file a report. But I'm telling you, it's a waste of paper. We're not getting this stuff back. You got renter's insurance?" Lily just stared at him. "Insurance? On what? On their poverty?" "Right," the officer said, understanding her silence. "Well, my advice, get better locks, and maybe think about moving." They were gone 5 minutes later. The apartment was just as empty, just as destroyed. But now it was filled with the bitter, metallic taste of helplessness. Lily stood in the center of the ruin, her mother's quiet, terrified sobs echoing behind her. She'd done everything right. She had worked, she had kept her head down, she had cared for her mother, and for nothing. The system had dismissed her. The world had abandoned her. And then she remembered. "If anything happens, call me." Her hand flew to her pocket. The heavy, black card was still there. It felt hot, dangerous. He had warned her. He had said they might come. The other family. Had he sent these men? No. His warning had been genuine. This was what he had been afraid of. This wasn't a junkie robbery. This was a message. They were looking for the necklace. Or they were looking for her. Her mother gasped, a tremor of pain starting in her limbs. Time was running out. Lily didn't have a choice. She had no pride left. She had only this one, terrifying, last resort. Her fingers, still shaking, dialed the silver numbers. It rang once. A low, calm voice answered. Not Marco. Yes, I need to speak to Marco DeLuca. Lily stammered. My name is Lily. He gave me this number. Last night, at Gino's. There was a click, a half-second of silence, and then his voice, sharp and alert. Lily, what happened? My apartment, she choked out, the words breaking. They tossed it. They took my mother's medication, all of it. The police won't do anything. She's in pain, please. I don't know what to do. There was a pause, but it wasn't a hesitation. It was the sound of a machine calculating. Where are you? She gave him the address. I'm 20 minutes out. He said. The line didn't go dead. He didn't say goodbye. He just hung up, the call ending with a finality that was as absolute as a vault door closing. Lily slid down the wall, pulling her mother's hand into hers. Help is coming, Mom. Just hold on. Help is coming. It was less than 20 minutes. It was maybe 15. The entire rotting building seemed to vibrate. It wasn't just a car. It was a convoy. Lily looked out the one grimy window that wasn't cracked. 3 black sedans, identical to the one from last night, had taken over the street, their engines idling with a low, predatory purr. The few neighbors who had been lingering on their stoops, drawn by the earlier police lights, vanished back into their apartments as if a switch had been thrown. Marco DeLuca stepped out of the center car. He wasn't wearing the pristine suit of last night. He was in dark pants, a black Henley that stretched across his shoulders, and a leather jacket. He looked faster, harder, and infinitely more dangerous. He was followed by Antonio and 2 other men, but also by a 4th man, older, carrying a black leather medical bag. Lily ran to the door and pulled it open. Marco took the stairs 2 at a time, his men forming a secure perimeter behind him. He didn't knock. He filled the doorway, his presence sucking all the air from the tiny, ruined apartment. His eyes took in the scene in one lethal sweep, the overturned sofa, the shattered glass, the pale, terrified woman on the floor, and Lily, standing amid the wreckage, looking like a ghost. A quiet, terrifying rage settled over his features, so cold it was almost a physical force. It wasn't the hot anger of the diner. This was a controlled Arctic fury that terrified the neighbors, who were now peeking from behind their curtains, more than the robbery itself. Antonio, he said, his voice a low growl, talk to the neighbors. Find out what they saw, what they didn't see. Sal, he said to another man, handle the police, get the report, and get the name of the officer who told her to get better locks. He then turned to the doctor, a gray-haired man with steady eyes. Doctor, see your mother. Immediately. The doctor nodded, stepping past Marco and kneeling by Eleanor, his voice calm and reassuring. Ma'am, my name is Dr. Albretti. I'm here to help. Let's see what we can do about that pain. Marco finally looked at Lily. He didn't move to touch her. He just watched her, his dark eyes cataloging her shaking hands, her pale face, her ragged breathing. You're safe now, he said. It wasn't a comfort. It was a statement of fact. You can't be here, Lily whispered, the absurdity of the situation crashing down on her. Men in suits, a private doctor, cars that cost more than her entire life. My neighbors, Sal. Your neighbors will see nothing, Marco said, his voice flat. Sal will be reassigned. He crouched, picking up the broken picture frame. It was a cheap photo of Lily and her mother, from years ago, before the illness. They were looking for the necklace. I hid it, she whispered. It's still here. It doesn't matter, he said, standing up. They know you had it. They know you spoke to me. This was the Romano family. This was a warning, and they will be back. The Romano family? My rivals, my enemies. It's my fault. I brought this to you. He looked at her, and for a second, she saw something under the coldness. Regret. The doctor stood. She's stable, but her pressure is high from the shock. I've given her a sedative and something for the pain. She needs rest, and she needs a new prescription. Immediately. She'll have it, Marco said. He turned to Lily. Pack a bag. Both of you. You're not staying here. Lily's head snapped up. What? No, we can't. I have my job. This is our home. We can't just leave. Your job is gone, he said, not unkindly. This is a box of filth. You're coming with me. I won't, Lily protested, a spark of her old, tired fight returning. You can't just take us. I don't even know you. This is kidnapping. He took a step closer. He was so tall. He seemed to block out the light from the one bulb overhead. Last night, I gave you a choice. That choice is gone. They came here. They put their hands on your mother. They took her medicine. They will come back. And next time, they won't be looking for pills. He let the words hang in the air. I am not asking you. Lily, I am telling you. I am the only one who can protect you from this. You and your mother are coming with me. Now. His certainty was absolute. It was the certainty of a man who moved mountains and buried his enemies. Lily looked at her mother, now resting, her breathing finally even, the terror lines on her face smoothed by the medication. She looked at the ruined apartment. He was right. This wasn't a home. It was a trap. She nodded, a single, defeated gesture. 10 minutes. Antonio will pack for you, he motioned, and the giant man stepped inside, moving with a surprising gentleness as he began sorting through the wreckage for salvageable clothes. Marco escorted her and her mother, carried in Antonio's arms as if she weighed nothing, down the stairs, past the silent, staring neighbors. He placed them in the back of the center car, the leather cool and soft against Lily's skin. The drive was silent. They left the grime of the docks, moving through the city, and then up into the hills overlooking Port Veritas, where the air was clean and the houses were hidden behind 10-foot-high walls and gates of wrought iron. They stopped at a building that was less an apartment and more a tower of glass and steel. When he took them to the top, the elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Lily stepped out and her breath caught. Her apartment, her entire life, could have fit into the entryway. The floors were black marble, gleaming. The walls were glass, floor to ceiling, revealing a staggering 180-degree view of the city and the dark, glittering ocean beyond. The furniture was all low, sleek lines of leather and chrome, and the air was silent, clean and temperature-controlled. It was a fortress of impossible luxury. Is this your home? She whispered. It's one of them, he said, distracted, already on his phone. Antonio, get her mother settled, the East Wing. Have the nurse meet her, full-time, and get that prescription filled. Now. He gestured for Lily to follow him. He led her to a vast, open kitchen with a stainless steel island. You'll be safe here. No one gets in. No one. The elevator is key-coded. My men are on every floor. For how long? Lily asked, her voice small. She felt tiny in this vast, empty space. Until I find out who ransacked your apartment, and until I find out who sent them. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. And until I find out how a girl like you ended up with my sister's necklace. That night, Lily slept in a bed larger than her mother's entire corner. The sheets were silk, or something like it, so soft they felt like water. But she didn't find rest. She found the fire. She was small, running. The air was thick with smoke, so hot it burned her lungs. She could hear screaming, a woman's voice, high and desperate, calling a name she couldn't understand. Lena, Lena. She was in a hallway, flames licking at the walls, the wallpaper peeling back in black, burning curls. A hand grabbed her, pulled her, a woman's arms, strong, smelling of soap and smoke. The woman was crying, holding her tight, pressing her face into her shoulder. Then, other hands. A man's shout. She was ripped from the woman's arms. The woman screamed, a sound of such agony it tore Lily from her sleep. She sat bolt upright in the dark, gasping. Her nightgown, a soft T-shirt one of Marco's men had provided, stuck to her with cold sweat. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She wasn't in the fire. She was in the penthouse. The only light was the glittering carpet of the city below. A shadow moved in the doorway. Lily screamed, scrambling back against the headboard. You're safe, Marco's voice, low and calm, cut through the dark. He didn't move closer. You were dreaming. She couldn't stop shaking. The smell of smoke was still in her nose. It was so real. He watched her for a long moment, a dark silhouette against the city lights. He said nothing, but she could feel the tension coming from him, a strange, coiled energy. He saw her crying, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking, and something in his chest, something he'd thought long dead and buried, twisted. He turned and left without a word. In his office, a room of dark wood and leather. Marco stared at a blank computer screen. He'd been watching her on the security feed, a small, black and white image of her sleeping in the guest room. He had seen the nightmare begin, the tossing, the turning, the small, muffled cries. He picked up his phone. "It's me," he said. "I want a new search. Everything, hospital records, child services, adoption agencies. I want anything related to a fire, a house fire, an orphanage, anything. 20 years ago, give or take, Nevada. Start there." He hung up. A burned-down orphanage in Nevada, a flicker of a memory, a dead-end report from years ago. He looked at the screen, at the girl now sitting awake, hugging her knees to her chest. Meanwhile, across town, in a cigar bar back room, a man knelt. "She's with DeLuca," the spy said, his voice nervous. He moved her and an old woman into his private penthouse this evening. Heavy security. Don Romano, a man with eyes like a dead fish, took a long, slow drag from his cigar. A girl. He starts a war, empties a diner, and puts his entire operation on hold for a girl. He smiled. A thin, unpleasant gesture. How interesting. Find out who she is. Find out why she's special. The next night, Lily couldn't sleep. The penthouse was too quiet. She wandered, a ghost in a glass castle, her feet silent on the cold marble. She found a library, a gym, and finally, Marco's private study. He wasn't there. She saw a bathroom off the study, larger than her old kitchen, with a shower that was a glass cube, desperate to wash off the grime of the last 2 days. She turned it on. The water was hot, the pressure immense. She scrubbed her skin until it was red, trying to wash away the fear, the smell of the fire, the memory of Sal's betrayal. She stepped out, wrapping herself in a towel that was impossibly thick and soft. She'd left her new, cheap clothes in the bedroom. She opened a closet in the study, assuming it was a linen closet. It was his. Rows of black and gray suits, a line of perfectly polished shoes, and on a hook, a simple black cotton t-shirt. It was huge, but it was soft, and it smelled not of cologne, but of him. Clean, sharp, expensive. She slipped it on. It fell to her knees, a ridiculous makeshift dress. She was toweling her hair dry when the study door opened. Marco stopped, frozen in the threshold. He'd come back for a file. He hadn't expected to find her. She was standing in the middle of his study, illuminated by the low desk lamp, her hair damp and curling around her face, her feet bare on the priceless rug. She was drowning in his shirt, the black cotton clinging to her damp skin, outlining the delicate curve of her hip, the smallness of her shoulders. She looked innocent, vulnerable, and impossibly beautiful. The air crackled, the silence stretched, thick with things unsaid. Lily's hand, the one holding the towel, slowly lowered. "I'm sorry. I used your shower. I'll go." "Don't," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. He walked into the room, not taking his eyes off her. He stopped just a foot away, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him, see the way his chest rose and fell. He raised a hand, slowly, as if not to frighten her. He brushed a damp strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers were calloused, rough from a life she couldn't imagine, but his touch was shockingly gentle. It traced the line of her jaw, a feather-light path that left a trail of fire in its wake. Lily's breath hitched. Her eyes fluttered shut. This was insane. This was the man who had terrified her, the man who lived in a world of shadows and violence. But his touch was the first kind. Gentle thing she had felt in that she couldn't remember how long. He leaned in. His gaze dropped to her mouth. He could smell the soap from his shower on her skin, a clean, fresh scent that was intoxicating. The tension in his chest, the one that had been building since he saw her cry, tightened, pulling him forward. He was going to kiss her. She knew it, and God help her. She wanted him to, but just as his lips were a breath from hers, the image of the fire flashed behind her eyes, the screaming, the fear, the feeling of being ripped away. She pulled back, her hands coming up to his chest to stop him, the flat, hard wall of his muscle startling her. "I can't," she whispered, her voice shaking. His eyes, dark and intense, searched hers. "I don't know what this is," she said, the words tumbling out in a desperate, honest rush. "I don't know who you are. I don't know who I am. I've spent my whole life just surviving, being invisible, being no one." She looked up at him, her eyes pleading. "I can't survive being someone else's secret." Marco looked at her, at this small, fierce, broken thing he had pulled into his world. She wasn't a secret, she was a reckoning. He took her hand from his chest, his grip firm, his thumb stroking the back of her knuckles. "Then I'll make you mine in the open," he said. Marco's promise. "Then I'll make you mine in the open," was not a lover's whisper. It was a strategic declaration. The next morning, Lily's world, which had already been fractured and reset, transformed again. She was moved from the guest suite to the east wing of the penthouse, a sprawling series of rooms with its own living area, study, and a reinforced glass balcony that overlooked the sea. It was a gilded cage, beautiful and isolating, but it was also a fortress. Her mother, Eleanor, was settled in a state-of-the-art medical suite on a lower floor, attended by a full-time private nurse. Her every need met with a quiet efficiency that left Lily breathless. But the protection was not just passive. It was active, pervasive, and total. "Antonio will be your primary," Marco informed her, not asking her, as they stood in the penthouse's gleaming, empty gym. "You will not leave this floor without him. You will not go to your mother's suite without him. He's not your friend, Lily. He's your shadow. He has one job, to keep you breathing. Do not make his job difficult." Lily, dressed in new, soft gray athletic wear that had been provided for her, nodded. She understood. She was a possession, a liability, a problem to be managed. "No," Marco said, his voice sharp, as if he'd read her mind. "You are not a problem, you are a target, and I will not have you walking into a bullet because you are untrained." That was when the training began. It was grueling, relentless, and terrifying. He didn't just assign it, he led it, 3 times a week. He took her to a private, soundproofed shooting range in the building's sub-basement. The first time he placed the small, heavy, black handgun in her palm, she recoiled, dropping it as if it were on fire. It clattered uselessly on the rubber mat. "I can't," she whispered, her hands shaking, her mind flashing back to the ruin of her apartment. "You will," Marco said, his voice flat. He picked it up, his movements economical. He didn't coddle her, he didn't soothe. He demanded, "You are weak, Lily. You have been weak your entire life because the world has forced you to be. You survived by being small, by being invisible. In my world, invisible things get crushed by accident. You will learn to be strong. You will learn to be seen. Pick it up." She did, her hands trembling so hard she needed both of them. He stepped behind her. He was close. So close she could feel the heat of his body, a solid wall of power at her back. He didn't wrap his arms around her in a romantic gesture. He was an instructor. He placed his large, calloused hand over hers, his grip firm, correcting her stance, forcing her wrist to lock. "Breathe," he commanded, his voice low in her ear. "You're fighting it. Don't fight it. Control it. Aim for the center and squeeze. Don't pull." His hand over hers. They fired. The explosion was deafening. Even with the earmuffs, the recoil punched through her arm, but his body absorbed the shock. The shot was wild. "Again," he said. They spent an hour. By the end, her arms ached, her ears rang, and she smelled of cordite and his faint, clean scent. But the last shot hit the paper. He taught her more than shooting. He taught her how to recognize danger, how to see the man who was watching too long, how to spot the car that had made the same 2 turns. He taught her how to handle pressure, how to lie, how to walk into a room and own the space, even when she was terrified. And as he taught her, he was learning. He was surprised by her. She was a survivor, not a victim. She absorbed his lessons with a quiet, desperate intensity. She had a resilience that had been forged in poverty and fear, a core of steel he hadn't expected. She didn't complain. She didn't cry. She just learned. While Lily was learning to survive in his world, Marco was desperately trying to unravel hers. One afternoon, a man in a quiet suit delivered a thick manila envelope to Marco's office, not Antonio. This was a man from the outside, a specialist in digging up ghosts. Marco waited until the penthouse was silent, until Lily was with her mother. He poured a short glass of scotch, the amber liquid catching the light, and opened the file. His investigation into the Nevada fires had borne fruit. It wasn't a house. It was an orphanage, St. Angela's home for children, in a dusty, forgotten town just outside Reno. 19 years ago, a fire had gutted the main dormitory, an electrical fault. The report said it happened in the dead of night. Marco's blood ran cold as he read the words. The fire had been catastrophic. 2 children had died. Their bodies were recovered from the wing that had collapsed, charred beyond recognition. The orphanage, already struggling, had shut down. The remaining children were scattered, their records lost or damaged in the blaze. He turned the page. His hand, the one holding the glass, was shaking. A grainy, black-and-white photocopy of the intake log, and then the coroner's summary. Fatality 1, male, approx. 6 years old, unidentified. Fatality 2, female, approx. 5 years old. Tentatively identified by a partially melted piece of a toy bear clutched in her hand. The toy bore a stitched name, Lena. Marco let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. It felt like a punch to the gut. He read on, his mind racing. The bodies were too damaged for the technology of the time. The identification was circumstantial. No one ever came to claim the body of Lena. She was buried in a pauper's grave, her file closed, but Lily's nightmares, she had told him about them. The smell of smoke, the screaming, being pulled from a woman's arms. He looked at the date of the fire. He cross-referenced it with Lily's intake into the Port Veritas foster system. She had appeared 3 weeks later, a Jane Doe found wandering near a bus station, mute from trauma, with no possessions save the clothes she was wearing. It was too much. It was too close. He began to suspect. A wild, terrifying, impossible hope began to bloom in his chest, a hope so fierce it hurt. He needed proof. He needed DNA. But he also needed to know from her. That night, their strange, tense cohabitation shifted. He found himself seeking her out, not as a trainer, but as something else. He found her in the vast, dark living room, curled up on a sofa, looking out at the city lights. She looked up, startled. As he entered, she was always on edge, a deer ready to bolt. "You're safe," he said, the words becoming a common refrain. He didn't sit. He stood by the window, a dark shadow against the glittering skyline. "You're good with your mother," she said quietly, breaking the silence. "The nurse, she's very kind. Thank you." He just nodded. "This world you live in," she said, her voice small. "All this, the guns, the guards. How do you live like this?" He turned. He looked at her. This small, resilient woman who had survived a life he could only imagine, and he did something he hadn't done in a decade. He confided, "It's not a life I chose," he said. His voice low, the sound rumbling in the dark room. "It was inherited. My father built this. He built it with violence and with fear, and when he died, it fell to me, to protect it, to protect my family. But it costs so much," she whispered, her eyes searching for him. "It costs everything," he said, his voice raw. "You try to do good. You try to build things, but the foundation is blood. You have to become a monster to fight the monsters, and you make compromises. You do things, you commit violence. You hurt people. And you tell yourself it's to protect the ones you love." He looked away, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on a past she couldn't see. "But I failed. The one time, the one person I was supposed to protect, my sister, I couldn't." He was back there. A 15-year-old boy, angry and proud, who'd left his post. He was supposed to be watching her play. He'd gone to take a call from a girl. 10 minutes. He was gone in 10 minutes. And when he came back, the nursery window was broken, and she was gone. Lily watched him, this powerful, terrifying man, as he was slowly crushed by the weight of a 20-year-old regret. She saw the pain he held inside, the guilt that drove him, that made him the cold, hard man he was. She slid off the couch. She walked over to him. He didn't flinch, but she saw his hands clench at his sides. She didn't speak. She didn't offer empty comforts. She just slipped her small, warm hand into his large, cold one. He froze. His breath hitched. He stared down at her hand, so small, so brave, holding his. He didn't pull away. He turned his hand, his fingers lacing with hers, his grip tight, almost painful, anchoring him to the present. They stood like that, in the dark, for a long time. The nightmares came back that night, worse than ever. The training, the file, the confession, it was all a cocktail for her subconscious. She wasn't just in the fire, she was the fire. The smoke was in her lungs, the heat was on her skin. She heard the woman screaming, "Lena, Lena, my baby, no." And then the man's voice, rough, grabbed her. "Leave the other one." She was being pulled, ripped away. She was crying. Reaching back, Lily woke with a gasp, a silent scream trapped in her throat. She was drenched in sweat, her heart hammering. And he was there, not in the doorway, not a shadow. He was sitting on the edge of her bed. He must have heard her cry out, his response time faster than any of her fears. The lamp was on, casting a low, golden light. "It was the fire!" she choked out, her body still shaking. "I know," he said, his voice impossibly gentle. He had a glass of water in his hand. He'd been waiting. He handed it to her, his fingers brushing hers. "I could hear them," she wept, burying her face in her hands. "Someone was screaming. They were pulling me." Marco's heart shattered. It was all he could do not to crush her, not to demand answers. Instead, he did what he had been aching to do. He reached out, his hand settling on her arm, his thumb rubbing slow, soothing circles on her skin. "You're okay," he whispered. He brushed the damp hair from her face, his touch reverent. "It's just a memory. Lily, it can't hurt you anymore." She looked up at him, her eyes wide and luminous with tears, her face pale in the lamplight. "How do you know?" "Because I'm here," he said, his voice thick, "and I'll keep you safe this time." The words. This time. He hadn't just said them to her. He had said them to the ghost of his sister, and the space between them collapsed. The air, thick with old grief and new hope, was too heavy. Lily's hand came up, not to his, but to his face. Her fingers, small and trembling, touched the rough stubble on his jaw. It was a question. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing for a fraction of a second. A raw, ragged breath escaped him. He was the boss, the Dawn, the monster, and she was everything he had lost. He lowered his head. She raised hers. He kissed her. It was not the kiss from the study, the one they had pulled back from. This was an inevitability. It was slow, aching, a desperate, tender exploration. His lips were firm, searching, and she tasted the scotch on his breath and the salt of her own tears. It wasn't a kiss of passion. Not yet. It was a kiss of profound, agonizing relief. It was a kiss that said, "You're real. I found you." He held her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her, one hand tangling in her hair, holding her head as if she were the most precious thing in the world. He wasn't holding Lily. He was holding Lena. He was holding his redemption. She clung to him, her fingers gripping his shirt, her body finally relaxing. The tremors of the nightmare fading, replaced by the solid, warm, and very real presence of the man holding her. They stayed like that, his mouth moving against hers with a tenderness that belied the hard life he lived. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathless. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "Marco," she whispered, her voice broken. "I know." He breathed. He didn't leave. He didn't push her back into the bed and cover her up. He laid down on top of the covers and pulled her down with him. He held her, his arms a cage of muscle and warmth, her head tucked under his chin. They were both still fully clothed, but they had never been more emotionally bare. And for the first time in her entire life, Lily Martin fell asleep feeling completely and utterly safe. The Romano family was not sleeping. He's moved her. The spy, a different one. A man who worked high-end catering reported to his capo. He's training her. She's in the penthouse, but he's keeping her hidden. Not for long, the capo sneered. DeLuca is soft. He always has been. He's speaking at the Children's Hospital Charity Gala, a public face. He'll be there. She won't be, the spy insisted. He's not stupid. He's in love, the capo corrected. That makes him the biggest fool in Port Veritas. He will bring her. He will want to show her off. Be there. Get a picture. Get a name. I want to know what weapon he's hiding. The spy was right. Marco was not stupid. But he was also a man who had made a promise. "You're coming with me," he stated. A week after their kiss, he was in her wing, holding a long, velvet box. "Coming where?" Lily asked. Her relationship with him had changed. The training was still hard, but the edges were softer. They ate dinner together. They talked. He still hadn't told her his suspicions, but the kiss hung between them, a silent, acknowledged bond. "The Port Veritas Children's Hospital Gala. It's important, to my mother's memory." He opened the box. Inside, on a bed of black satin, was a dress the color of a midnight sky and a simple, elegant diamond bracelet. "I can't," she said, her eyes wide. "Marco, that's your world, not mine." "It is now," he said, his voice firm. He handed her the box. "I'll make you mine in the open, remember?" She was his companion. That was the word that buzzed through the ballroom. When Lily walked in on Marco DeLuca's arm, the entire glittering world of Port Veritas society stopped to stare. She was unrecognizable. The pale, thin waitress was gone. In her place was a woman of breathtaking, quiet beauty. Her hair was up, her face transformed by a professional, and the simple, dark dress clung to her with an elegance that money couldn't buy. She was terrified. But as Marco had taught her, she channeled it. She kept her head high, her hand light on his arm, her expression serene. "This is Lily," Marco said, introducing her to a senator, to a judge, to the old money families of the city. He didn't say Lily Martin, just Lily. It was a declaration. Across the room, a waiter, polishing a glass, paused. He raised his phone. Shielded by a silver tray, he zoomed in. He saw the girl. He saw the way DeLuca looked at her, a possessive, protective fire he'd never seen in the boss. And then he saw the necklace. Lily, in a gesture of bravery, had worn it. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder of who she was. It rested on her collarbone, the small, silver teardrop locket. The waiter's phone clicked. The photo, with a close-up on the necklace, was sent to the Romano capo before Lily had even finished her first glass of water. The capo stared at the image. He didn't recognize the girl, but he recognized the locket. He forwarded the image to the old Don Romano himself. The response was immediate, a single, furious call. "That is a DeLuca heirloom, the one that was on the girl, the one that was lost." "What does it mean, Don Romano?" "It means," the old man snarled, "that DeLuca has found a new weakness, or he has found an old one. It does not matter. A bounty was placed on her head before the night was over. $50,000. Not for the girl, for the necklace, and the head of the woman wearing it. The charity gala was a glittering illusion, a sea of diamonds and polite laughter that felt worlds away from the grime of Geno's. Lily stood on the terrace, the cool night air a relief, her hand resting on Marco's arm for the first time in her life. She felt not only safe, but seen. The midnight blue dress he had given her moved like water around her legs, and the simple diamond bracelet on her wrist felt heavier than any plate she had ever carried. Marco had not left her side, his presence a solid, warm wall, his eyes never leaving her for more than a second. He was in the middle of a low, terse conversation with a senator, his public face of bored charm firmly in place. When it happened, it was not a loud bang. It was a sharp, distinct crack, like a champagne cork, immediately followed by the high-pitched musical shatter of the grand crystal chandelier. Time slowed, a woman screamed, a glass hit the marble floor. Marco didn't look, he didn't wait. His reaction was pure, violent instinct. In one motion, he spun, shoving the senator to the ground, his body covering Lily's. He pushed her down behind a thick, marble-topped serving bar, his entire body a shield. "Stay down!" he roared. The command a physical force. Chaos exploded. The ballroom erupted in screams, more cracks, this time louder, and the sickening, wet thud of bullets hitting plaster and flesh. Antonio, who'd been 10 feet away, was suddenly at their side, his own gun drawn, firing back toward the service entrance. "They came from the kitchen," Antonio yelled, his face grim. "2 shooters!" Marco's hand was on the back of Lily's neck, holding her head down, his other hand drawing the gun he always carried from the small of his back. "Paolo, Rico, cover the exit," he yelled to his other 2 men. There was a burst of gunfire from across the room, a pained cry, and then silence from that corner. "Boss, Paolo's down, Rico's hit," Antonio shouted, ducking as a spray of bullets chipped the marble inches from his head. Marco's face was a mask of cold, lethal fury. He looked at Lily, her eyes wide with a terror so profound she couldn't even make a sound. "We're leaving! Now!" He grabbed her hand. "On my count. 3. He didn't wait for 3. He surged up, pulling her with him, his body still between her and the gunfire. "Antonio, go!" Antonio moved, a blur of black and gray, providing covering fire. Marco ran, dragging Lily, his grip on her hand so tight she thought her bones would break. They didn't go for the front door. They plunged back into the chaos, through a side door that led to a private corridor. An alarm was blaring, a high, insistent wail. They burst out of a fire exit and into a dark alley. The black sedan was already there, its engine roaring, a different driver at the wheel, a man Lily had never seen. Marco threw open the back door, shoved Lily in, and piled in after her, landing half on top of her. Antonio leaped into the passenger seat, his arm bleeding. "Go, go, safe house 3, Marco bellowed. The car leaped from the curb, tires screaming, just as 2 men in waiters' uniforms burst from the same exit, their guns firing into the night. The bullets pinged uselessly off the armored trunk as the sedan disappeared into the labyrinth of Port Veritas. Lily was shaking. Not a small tremor, but a violent, body-racking shudder she couldn't control. The entire event had lasted less than 90 seconds. 2 men were dead. Paolo, Rico, men who had been guarding her. They drove for 30 minutes in absolute, ringing silence, weaving through a maze of industrial parks and dark highways. The car finally dipped into an underground garage, the steel door rolling shut behind them with a heavy, final thud. The safe house was not a penthouse, it was a bunker. Concrete walls, no windows, functional, brutalist furniture, and a kitchen of brushed steel. It was cold, sterile, and utterly secure. "Get her inside," Marco ordered the driver. He was at Antonio's side, inspecting the wound. "It's a graze. Clean it, stitch it. We have a kit." "Boss," Antonio started. "Now, Antonio, that's an order." Lily stumbled into the small, stark living room, her legs giving way. She collapsed onto a low, leather sofa, her mind blank. The midnight blue dress was a mockery. She was a doll he had dressed up, a target he had painted on her back. Marco walked in, his jacket gone, his white shirt splattered with what she realized was Antonio's blood. He saw her, and the cold fury on his face softened, replaced by a deep, aching exhaustion. "You're shaken," he said. It wasn't a question. "They're dead," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. "Because of me. Because of this necklace." Her hand flew to her throat, her fingers fumbling with the clasp. "Stop," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "They are dead because the Romano family are animals. They are dead because it was their job to protect me. And by extension, you. This is my world. Lily. This is the price of it. I need to wash," she stammered, scrambling to her feet. "I need a shower." She couldn't stand the smell of champagne and gunpowder, the feeling of the expensive dress on her skin. He pointed to a hallway. "Last door." The bathroom was as sterile as the rest of the apartment, a single, frosted glass shower stall. Lily locked the door, a useless gesture, and turned on the water, as hot as she could stand it. She tore the dress off, letting it fall to the tile floor. She stepped under the spray, her back against the wall, and finally she cried. She cried for Paolo and Rico. She cried for the pale, terrified waitress she used to be. She cried for the life she had lost and the terrifying one she had found. The sobs were silent, agonizing. Her body shaking so hard she had to grip the faucet to stay upright. She was trying to scrub the night off her skin, scrubbing until she was raw. But the feeling of being a target, of being the cause of so much death, wouldn't go away. The bathroom door opened. She didn't hear it over the sound of the water. She just felt a change in the air. She spun, her hands coming up to cover herself, a small scream dying in her throat. Marco stood in the steam-filled room, fully clothed. His hair was damp from the humidity, his shirt stained, his eyes black with an emotion she couldn't name. He was just watching her. His expression shattered. He had heard her. The silent, desperate sobs of someone breaking apart. She started, trying to find her voice. He didn't speak. He just stepped into the shower stall with her. The water, scalding hot, plastered his shirt to his chest, his pants to his legs, in an instant. He didn't flinch. He just reached for her, his large, warm hands settling on her shoulders. He pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her, holding her tightly. He buried his face in her wet hair, his body a solid, living anchor in the chaos of her mind. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice a low, rough vibration against her skin. "I've got you. You're safe. You're safe now." He just held her, repeating the words like a prayer, a mantra against the violence of the night. He held her as she cried, his own clothes soaked, his body shielding her even from her own fear. He didn't try to kiss her. He didn't try to do anything but hold her together. When the sobs finally quieted, he turned off the water. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by their breathing and the drip of the faucet. He unwrapped a thick, white towel from the rack and gently wrapped it around her, his movements careful, almost reverent. He led her out of the bathroom, into the stark bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the towel, her hair dripping. He knelt in front of her, his wet clothes pooling on the floor, and took her hands. "I will not let this happen again," he said, his voice raw. "I will end this. I will burn their whole family to the ground before I let them touch you. Marco," she whispered, her voice broken. He leaned in and kissed her. It was not like the first kiss, the one of discovery. This was a kiss of raw, desperate possession. It was a promise, a vow sealed in the aftermath of violence. It was gentle, yet fiercely protective, his lips moving over hers with a reverence that made her heart ache. He slowly, carefully, reached for the necklace at her throat. His fingers undid the clasp, the silver locket falling into his palm. He looked at it, the cause of all this, his expression dark. "This changes nothing," he whispered, setting it on the nightstand. He looked back at her, his eyes burning into hers. "You're mine now, Lily. Necklace or no necklace, mine to protect, mine to everything." He kissed her again, deeper this time. A slow, claiming kiss that stole the air from her lungs. He laid her back on the bed, his body covering hers, not with the panicked weight of the gala, but with a deliberate, possessive warmth. The night was cold. The concrete room was a prison, but in his arms, she felt a fire ignite. It was an intimacy born of shared terror and a desperate need for life. It was gentle and restrained, a breathless, emotional consummation where every touch was a promise to erase the night's horrors, a vow that they were alive, and they were together. The next morning, Lily woke up tangled in the sheets, alone. She found Marco in the kitchen, a phone pressed to his ear, his back to her. The cold dawn was back. "I don't care what it costs," he was snarling into the phone. "I want eyes on every Romano location. I want to know when they sleep, when they eat. Antonio..." He paused, listening. "I don't want a plan. I want an ambush. I want this over. They put their hands on what is mine. I will cut their hands off." He hung up, the silence heavy. Lily, wrapped in a gray bathrobe she'd found, stood in the doorway, He was a killer. He was planning to murder. And last night, he had been the only thing on earth that made her feel safe. The contradiction was tearing her apart. She was his, but she was also his prisoner, restless, terrified, and grieving. She wandered the small safe house. Antonio sat by the only door, his arm in a sling, his face a granite mask. There was no escape. Later that afternoon, Marco was in the bedroom, the door closed, on another, more heated call. Lily paced the living room, her nerves screaming. Antonio stood, wincing, to get a bottle of water from the kitchen, his back to her for a moment. She heard him grunt. "This whole thing, it's like that ring all over again." Lily froze. "Ring?" Antonio turned, his expression annoyed that she'd spoken. "Nothing. Business." "No," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "What ring?" Antonio sighed, the pain medication clearly making him less guarded. "A Romano family legend. They've been sniffing around a pawn shop in the Italian quarter for 20 years. Supposedly, the old De Luca Don, your man's grandfather, had a ring made to match the girl's locket. It turned up in that shop. The Romanos thought it was a clue, a trail. They've been leaning on the owner ever since. A matching ring, a pawn shop, a trail. It was the first piece of her past that didn't come from Marco. It was a thread, her thread, and she had to pull it. She waited 2 hours. Marco was still locked in his war room, the sound of his low, angry voice a constant hum. Antonio was on the sofa, his eyes heavy, the pain and the medication taking their toll. A food delivery arrived. Antonio, annoyed, got up to handle it, his back to her as he verified the order with the guard outside the steel door. It was her only chance. In the kitchen, there was a service elevator, a dumbwaiter for supplies. It was small, meant for trash. Without a second thought, she pulled it open, climbed inside, and hit the button for the garage level. It was a stupid, insane risk. She slipped out into the garage, past the guards who were focused on the main elevator, and out a side fire door. She was on the street. She was in a bathrobe and slippers. She didn't care. She flagged a cab, the driver giving her a look of profound pity. "The Italian Quarter," she said, her voice shaking. "Sesto's Pawn?" The shop was buried on a side street, its windows thick with dust and despair. She walked in, the bell tinkling. An old man with eyes like a hawk looked up from his newspaper. "We're not taking robes," he grunted. Lily walked to the counter. She pulled the necklace from her pocket. She didn't put it on the counter. She just held it in her palm. "I'm not here to sell. I'm here for information." "About a ring that matches this." The old man's face went white. He looked past her, to the door, his hand moving under the counter. "I'm not here to hurt you," Lily said, her voice desperate. "The Romanos, they're after me. The De Lucas, they're protecting me. I don't know who to trust. I just want to know who I am." The old man saw the terror in her eyes. He saw the necklace, and he saw something else, her face. He stared at her, as if seeing a ghost. "You have her face," he whispered. "Whose face?" He fumbled under his desk, pulling out a battered tin box. "She came in. Almost 20 years ago. A woman. Terrified. She sold me the ring. Said she needed to get out of the country. She left and said she'd be back. Never was." He opened the box and pushed 2 small, black and white photo booth pictures across the counter. Lily's hand trembled as she picked them up. The first was of a woman, dark-haired, beautiful, but with a haunted, terrified look in her eyes. The second was of that same woman, holding a small child, a girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, with wide, dark eyes and a shy smile, a girl who looked exactly like her. "She was stolen," Lily breathed, realizing a physical blow. "This is me." "That's what the woman said," the pawnbroker whispered. "She said she was saving the girl from monsters." A cold dread settled over Lily. Saving her from who? Who were the monsters? "She never said," the old man said, his eyes sad. "But she had the ring, and the girl, and she was running from someone." Lily stared at the picture. Saving her. Had this woman, this stranger, saved her from the De Luca family? Has Marco's protection been a lie? Was he not her savior, but her original captor? The story of the kidnapping, the lost sister. Was it all a lie to keep her, his property? In his gilded cage? She ran from the shop, the photos clutched in her hand, her mind spinning. When she got back to the safe house, all hell had broken loose. Antonio was on his feet, his gun drawn, the steel door was open, and Marco was standing in the hall, his face pale with a terror she had never seen. "Lily!" he roared, his voice breaking with relief and then hardening into pure fury. "Where were you? Do you have any idea what you did?" "I know!" she shouted, shoving past him into the room. She was done being his doll. She was done being his secret. She threw the photos on the steel table. "Naruto? Who am I? Marco? Who is this woman and who am I? Was I stolen from you or was it stolen by you? I stole me. I stole me." Marco froze. He looked at the photos. He saw the woman. He saw the child. He saw Lily. He looked up, his face a mask of conflict. The truth. She wanted the truth. "I don't know who that woman is," he said, his voice quiet. All the rage gone. "I don't know how you got to that orphanage." "So you did know," she cried, betrayed. "I suspected," he yelled back. "I found the file on the fire." I hoped. "You hoped what? That I was your lost sister? That I was Lena?" The name hung in the air. His silence was her answer. "And what if I am?" she whispered, her heart breaking. "Does that make me your sister? Or this?" She gestured between them, to the bed, to the night they had shared. He stalked across the room, grabbing her by the shoulders. His grip was hard, his eyes burning into hers, all the lies and half-truths burning away, leaving only a raw, desperate core. "I don't care who you were," he said, his voice a low, ragged growl. "I don't care if you're Lily Martin or Lena DeLuca or the Queen of England. I only care about who you are right now." He pulled her to him, his mouth crashing down on hers, a kiss not of tenderness but of desperation, a kiss that was trying to erase her questions, to erase the past, to claim the present. She was torn. He was lying. He was all she had. Just as she decided to stay, just as her body softened against his, just as she was about to choose him, the world exploded. A deafening roar. The concrete walls of the safe house seemed to bend. The steel door was ripped from its hinges, the reinforced glass in the kitchen, designed to stop bullets, spider-webbed and then imploded. The last thing Lily saw before the darkness took her was the ceiling cracking and the look of sheer, unadulterated terror on Marco's face as he threw his body over hers one last time. The world returned not as sound, but as pressure. A high-pitched, agonizing whine that drilled into Lily's skull, and a crushing, impossible weight across her back and legs. The air was thick, choked with pulverized concrete, the smell of cordite and burning electrical wires. She was pinned, then the weight moved. A low, animalistic groan, and the slab of shattered wall was heaved aside. Marco. He was on his hands and knees over her, a dark shadow in the gray. Swirling dust, blood was streaming from a cut above his eye, matting his hair, dripping onto her face. But he wasn't looking at the chaos. He was looking at her, his eyes wild with a terror she had never seen, a terror that eclipsed all his power. "Lily, look at me." His voice was a raw bark. "Are you hit? Say something." She tried to take a breath. A sharp, searing pain exploded in her chest, as if a dozen knives had been driven into her ribs. She cried out, a sound that was half gasp, half sob. I can't breathe." His gaze swept down her body. The gray bathrobe she wore was torn, and the sleeve on her left arm was melted, stuck to her skin, the flesh underneath an angry, weeping red. The terror in his eyes vanished, replaced by something colder, something infinitely more frightening. The last remnant of the civilized man he pretended to be burned away, leaving only the uncontainable rage of a predator. "Antonio!" he roared, his voice echoing in the ruined bunker. Antonio stumbled from the dust-filled hallway, his arm free of the sling, his gun in his hand, his face a mask of grim duty. "Boss, they're in the garage. At least 4. They're coming up." "Good," Marco snarled. He didn't look at his man. He gently, so gently, scooped Lily into his arms. She screamed as her broken ribs shifted, the sound tearing at his soul. He didn't pause. He just held her tighter, his body a fortress. "Get us to the secondary car. Hold them off. Then you call Vinny. You call Sal. You call everyone on my payroll. You tell them this is not a drill. This is war. Boss, the Romanos are organized. They just tried to kill her." Marco cut him off, his voice a low, terrifying rumble as he moved, fast, toward the service elevator. "They put their hands on her. I am not planning an ambush. Antonio, I am planning an erasure. I will burn their family to ash." The next 24 hours were a blur of calculated, righteous fury, while Lily was rushed to a private, unmarked medical facility, a clinic owned and operated by DeLuca Assets. Marco unleashed his storm. He didn't send his men. He led them. He stormed the Romano compound, a high-end restaurant in the Italian quarter that served as their headquarters. Not with stealth, but with the righteous fury of an avenging god. It wasn't a gunfight, it was a cleansing. He moved with a singular, brutal purpose. For every pained, shallow breath Lily took, he took one of their men. For the angry burn on her arm, he burned their entire operation to the ground. Key members, the capo who had organized the strike, the old Don's most trusted lieutenants, the men who had placed the bomb were dealt with. The violence was swift, decisive, and terrifying in its efficiency. By dawn, the Romano family, as a functioning entity, was broken. The FBI, drawn by the sounds of a war zone erupting in the heart of the city, swarmed the scene, their sirens a hollow echo of the night's brutality. They found Marco DeLuca standing in the shattered restaurant lobby, his suit ruined, his hands dark with soot, his face a cold, impassive mask. "It's over. DeLuca," the lead agent said, his hand on his holster. "We've got you." Marco didn't even look at him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, encrypted thumb drive. He tossed it to the agent. "That," Marco said, his voice flat, "is every financial record the Romanos have. It links their operation directly to Senator Davies, 2 federal judges, and your own deputy director. It's a federal corruption case that will make your career, or," he paused, "you can arrest me. And that drive vanishes. You can't have both. Choose." The agent stared at the drive, then at the carnage around him, and finally at the cold, unblinking eyes of the man who had just handed him his future. "Get out of here, DeLuca," the agent muttered, pocketing the drive. "And get clean. You were never here." Marco turned and walked away. The rising sun at his back, leaving the FBI to clean up his mess, the threat was neutralized. Lily woke up to the smell of antiseptic and the beep of a heart monitor. Her world was white. White walls, white sheets, a white, sterile silence. A dull, throbbing ache radiated from her chest, and her left arm was swathed in thick, white bandages. She was in a private room, more like a luxury hotel than a hospital. A nurse, quiet and efficient, checked her vitals. "Where am I?" Lily whispered, her throat dry. "You're safe, Miss Martin," the nurse said, her voice soothing. "You have 2 broken ribs and second-degree burns on your arm and shoulder. You are very lucky, mister. DeLuca's personal physician is overseeing your care." "Marco, is he?" "Mister, DeLuca is unharmed," the nurse said, her face impassive. "He's handling the business arrangements. He has left strict orders for your protection." Lily looked past her. 2 of Marco's men, new faces she didn't recognize, stood sentinel outside her door. She was a patient, but she was also, still, a prisoner. Days melted into a haze of pain medication, physical therapy, and a deep, penetrating loneliness. Marco did not come. He called once, a short, clipped conversation with the doctor, which Lily overheard. He wanted updates. He wanted reports, but he didn't want to speak to her. The man who had held her, who had kissed her, who had vowed to protect her, was gone. He had won his war, and now he was avoiding her. The realization was a colder, sharper pain than her broken ribs. On the 5th day, the nurse announced a visitor. "A Sister Mary Catherine," the nurse said, her brow furrowed. "She says it's urgent." An old woman, smaller and frailer than her own mother, was wheeled into the room. She wore a simple, dark nun's habit, and her face was a kind, wrinkled map of a long, quiet life. She was clutching a worn, brown leather satchel to her chest. "Miss Martin?" the nun whispered, her voice like dry leaves. "It's just Lily," Lily said, pushing herself up on the pillows, wincing. "Do I know you?" "No, child. But I believe I know you." The nun's hands, gnarled with arthritis, fumbled with the clasp of her satchel. She pulled out a worn newspaper clipping. It was the society page photo from the gala, a picture of Marco, powerful and handsome, and her, staring at him, her face full of a light she didn't recognize. The necklace was clear, resting on her collarbone. "I saw this in the paper the hospital charity sends us," the nun said, her voice trembling. "I saw your face, and I thought, how lovely. She looks so much like her. But then I saw the locket." "What are you talking about?" Lily's heart began a low, painful hammering. "My name is Sister Mary Catherine," the old woman said, her eyes filling with tears. "I was a teacher at St. Angela's Home for Children in Nevada. I was there the night of the fire." Lily's breath hitched. "The nightmares. The smoke." "Lena, it wasn't an accident, child," the nun whispered, leaning forward, her gaze intense. "I never told the police. I was too afraid. Men came that night, angry, shouting men. They were looking for someone. A new helper, a young woman who had arrived only a week before, with a child she said she was protecting." Lily's mind flashed to the photos from the pawn shop, the haunted woman, the little girl. "The men started the fire," the nun continued, her voice breaking. "To flush them out, I think. It was God's own inferno. The screaming, I was trying to get the children from the dormitory. But I heard a cry, not from the wing, but from the chapel. I ran, and I found you." "Me?" "You," the nun said, her hand reaching out to touch Lily's. "You were huddled behind the altar, abandoned. The woman must have left you there, hoping you'd be safe, and then God rest her soul, she must have run to lead them away." "I don't—" Lily was shaking. "You were sobbing," the nun said, a new urgency in her voice. "You were wearing this." She tapped the locket in the photo. "I hid it. I took it off you, so no one would know who you were. I thought it would protect you, to be anonymous. And you were clutching this." From the depths of her satchel, she pulled a small, clear plastic bag. Inside was a charred, melted ruin of a stuffed toy. It was a bear, or had been. It was scorched black, its fur melted, one ear gone, but on its small, burned velvet belly, stitched in what was once bright red thread, were 4 unmistakable letters. Lena. The world tilted, the beeping of the monitor faded, replaced by the roar of an old, distant fire. Marco sat in his office, the penthouse dark, the city lights below a glittering, mocking reminder of a world he no longer felt a part of. The bottle of scotch on his desk was half empty. In his hand was a single sheet of paper, a lab report. He had retrieved the locket from the safe house ruins. He had swabbed it for touch DNA. He had gotten a sample of his own. The nun's story had just been the final, agonizing confirmation. Paternity, sibling analysis, 99.999% probability. He crushed the paper in his fist. She was Lena, his sister, his long-lost 5-year-old sister, whom he had left alone for 10 minutes. She was alive, and he had failed her. He had failed her for 20 years. While he was building an empire, she was scrubbing floors. While he was sleeping in silk sheets, she was surviving on scraps, caring for her mother. And then, he'd found her. And what had he done? He'd terrified her. He'd trained her. He'd held her. He'd kissed her. He had laid beside her in the dark, his body aching for her, not as a brother but as a man. The self-loathing that washed over him was so profound it was a physical sickness. He couldn't face her. He couldn't look at the sister he had failed, the woman he had desired. He had won the war. He had destroyed his enemies, but he had lost himself. The door to his office opened. He didn't look up. "Get out, Antonio." I said no. "It's not Antonio." His head snapped up. Lena, stood in the doorway. She was pale, still thin, her arm in a fresh white sling, but her eyes were not the haunted, fearful eyes of the waitress. They were clear, strong, and fixed on him. He sprang to his feet, his chair scraping violently. You shouldn't be here. You're supposed to be at the clinic. They released me, she said, her voice quiet. She walked into the room, her gaze never leaving his. She saw the bottle. She saw the crushed paper on his desk. It's true, isn't it? He flinched, turning away from her, his back a rigid wall of denial. Get out, Lily. That's not my name, she said, stopping just behind him, his shoulders tensed. Get out. No, she would not be dismissed. Not now. Not after all this. You've been avoiding me. Why? You destroyed the Romanos. You did what you said you would. You protected me. You found me. And now you won't even look at me. I can't. The words were ripped from him, a raw, broken sound that echoed in the dark, silent room. Why? She demanded, her voice breaking. He spun, his face a mask of such profound self-hatred that she recoiled. Because I can't look at you, he roared, his pain filling the vast space. I can't look at you and not think about everything you went through. The fire, the orphanage, that dinner, the years of all those wasted, horrible years I was here, in this tower. And you were starving. He stalked toward her, his eyes wild. I was supposed to protect you. I was 15 when I left you, for 10 minutes, and you were gone. My whole life has been penance for that day. And it wasn't enough. He stopped, his chest heaving. I didn't protect you from any of it, and then I found you, and God help me. He couldn't say it. I wanted you. Lily stared at him, the full, crushing weight of his guilt, his 20 years of self-torture, finally clear. He wasn't pushing her away because he was disgusted. He was pushing her away because he thought he had failed her. She stepped toward him, closing the distance. My whole life, she whispered, her voice shaking but gaining strength. My whole life. I was alone. I was invisible. I was a ghost. I wasn't even a person. I was just surviving. She reached up, her good hand, and touched his face, his rough, unshaven jaw. He flinched, a violent, self-hating tremor, but she held him firm. You were the first person who ever saw me. Marco, she said, her eyes, his eyes, staring into his eyes. You were the first person who ever fought for me. She took his large, trembling hand and held it. You didn't fail me. You found me. You protected me. That's all that matters now. He stared at her, his breath catching, the darkness in his eyes warring with a desperate, impossible light. He searched her face, looking for disgust, for accusations. He found only acceptance, forgiveness. Lily, he breathed, the name a habit. She just shook her head, a small, sad smile on her lips. He pulled her to him, his arms wrapping around her, crushing her to his chest, careful of her ribs, his face burying in her hair. What were we before the kiss? I didn't know, he choked out, the confession tearing him apart. I know, she whispered against his heart. It doesn't matter. That there were two lost people holding on in the dark. This is different. Lena, he said, the name finally crossing his lips. It felt foreign, sacred. He pulled back, his hands framing her face. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing for the first time not just the waitress, not just the target, but the piece of his own soul that had been ripped away. He saw his mother's eyes, his father's jaw, his own stubborn fire, and he kissed her. It was not the kiss of a lover. It was not the chase kiss of a brother. It was something else entirely. It was a kiss of recognition, of reunion, of two fractured halves becoming whole. It was desperate and reverent and breathless. It was the end of all the loneliness, the end of the guilt. He lifted her, her one good arm wrapping around his neck, and carried her from the office, past the ghosts of their past, and into his bedroom. He laid her on the bed, his movements slow, deliberate, as if she were a miracle. I will never lose you again, he vowed, his voice thick. He shed his jacket, his shirt, and his back a roadmap of old scars. She watched him, not with fear, but with a sense of belonging. This was it. This was home. He moved over her, his hands gentle, his mouth worshipful. It was a slow, emotional, reverent claim There was no shame. There was no guilt. There was only this, a man and a woman, bound by blood, by fire, and by a fate that had torn them apart only to forge them into something new. It was a breathless, desperate collision, a final, absolute surrender to the truth. He held her, his body joined with hers, the silence of the room broken only by their ragged breathing. It was the release of 20 years of pain. It was the start of everything. He collapsed against her, his face buried in the soft skin of her neck, his entire body trembling. And as the dawn began to break, painting the sky in shades of gray and purple, he whispered her name, not as a title, not as a memory, but as a prayer. Lena. The following weeks were a strange, breathless alchemy. The woman who was Lily Martin, a ghost surviving in the margins, slowly, painstakingly, began to recede. In her place, a new person was being forged, a woman who had to learn how to be Lena DeLuca. It was not just a change of name. It was a recalibration of a soul. The penthouse, once a fortress of glass and steel, became a chrysalis. Lena's physical wounds healed. The angry red burns on her arm faded into pale, silvery scars, a permanent reminder of the fire that had both taken and given her life. Her ribs knitted, the sharp, stabbing pain dulling into a memory. But the deeper transformation was internal. Marco was her guide. He was no longer the cold, calculating dawn, nor the tormented, guilt-ridden man in the dark. He was simply her brother. He was fierce in his protection, but also surprisingly patient. He seemed to be learning as much as she was, unlearning 20 years of a life lived as penance and discovering a new one lived as a family. He brought her old photographs, albums he had dug out of storage, his hands trembling slightly as he showed them to her. A chubby-cheeked baby, a grinning 5-year-old with a missing front tooth, her arms wrapped around the neck of a lanky, brooding 15-year-old boy. "I remember that day," he'd murmur, his voice thick. "You had just learned to tie your shoes. You were so proud. You refused to take them off. You slept in them." She, in turn, told him about Eleanor, about the quiet, brave woman who had been her anchor, her only family, for as long as she could remember. Marco, without hesitation, had moved Eleanor into the finest long-term care facility in the state, visiting her himself, sitting by her bed, quietly thanking the woman who had, in her own way, raised his sister. But the whispers of Port Veritas were growing louder. The decimation of the Romano family, followed by the high-level arrests that had shaken the city's political foundations, had left a power vacuum, and the rumors about the girl Marco DeLuca was keeping in his tower were rampant. "It's time," he said one morning. 3 weeks after the bombing, he was standing in the study, his face set in the familiar, determined lines of the boss. "We can't hide you anymore. Lena, it's not safe. The only way to protect you is to make you untouchable." He was proposing a press conference. The idea sent a jolt of pure, cold terror through her. "Marco, no, I can't stand in front of all those people after being Lily. They'll look at me like I'm a fraud." He came to her, taking her good hand in his. "You are not a fraud. You are the truest thing in this entire city. You are a DeLuca. You survived. They are not coming to judge you. Lena, they are coming to meet you, to bear witness." He squeezed her hand. "I will be with you every second." The ballroom of the DeLuca Grand Hotel was filled to bursting. It was not a criminal underworld gathering. It was the city. Reporters from every major newspaper, television crews, even national correspondents who had been following the Romano corruption scandal. Marco walked in first, not in his usual dark, imposing suits, but in a tailored navy blue, his face calm and authoritative. The room fell silent. He walked to the podium, a simple, dark wood lectern bearing the DeLuca family crest. "For 20 years, he began, his voice amplified, clear and steady. "My family has lived with a shadow, a loss that defined us and defined me. Many of you called it a tragedy. My enemies," his eyes swept the room, cold and hard for a brief second, "called it a weakness. We called it a missing piece." He turned, his gaze softening as he looked toward the entryway. "Today that piece is home." It was her cue. Lena walked into the room. She was not the glittering, terrified companion from the gala. She was dressed in a simple, elegant cream-colored dress, her hair pulled back, her scars hidden, her posture perfect, a result of the training that had, ironically, prepared her for this moment more than any gunfight. She walked with a quiet, unassailable dignity. She did not go to the podium. She stood beside him, her hand finding his. "This is my sister, Lena DeLuca," Marco said, his voice thick with an emotion no one in that room had ever heard from him. "She was taken from us, not by criminals, but by a coward. She survived unimaginable hardship, not as a lost heir, but as a woman of quiet strength and resilience. She is alive. She is home. And the DeLuca family is, for the first time in 20 years, whole." He then laid out the story, carefully edited, the fire, the orphanage, the anonymous life. He did not mention the Romanos or the violence. He presented it as a miracle, a story of survival. A reporter, bold, shouted from the front, "Miss DeLuca, where have you been? What do you remember?" Lena felt Marco's hand tighten, ready to shut it down, but she stepped forward, just one step. The microphones turned toward her. "I was Lily Martin," she said, her voice soft, yet it carried across the hushed room. "And I am grateful for the life I had. It taught me that survival is not always loud, that strength can be quiet, and that most people are just trying to get by." She looked at Marco. "I don't remember the life I lost, but I am here to build a new one." The press conference was a masterstroke. It silenced the speculation. It transformed Lena from a mysterious, hidden liability into a public symbol of hope and resilience. She was no longer Marco's weakness. She was his strength, and the city embraced her. The shift in the DeLuca empire was just as seismic. The violence had served its purpose. It had cleared the board, ended the war, and allowed Marco to do what he had, apparently, long wanted to do. "My father," he explained to Lena one night as they sat in his office, now a shared space, "ran this family on a principle of enforced stability. He used fear as a currency. The Romanos used chaos. I'm tired of both." He unrolled a set of blueprints on the vast mahogany desk. They weren't for a casino or a nightclub. They were for a logistics company, a shipping hub that would rival the old, corrupt dock authority. "This is the future," he said, his finger tracing the lines. "Legitimate business. We own the ports. We own the transport. We own the infrastructure. We will be the ones who build Port Veritas, not the ones who bleed it." He proposed a new direction for the DeLuca empire. He poured tens of millions of dollars into legal businesses, into urban renewal, into charitable foundations. The DeLuca Family Foundation was his first project, and he placed Lena at its head. She balked. "Marco, I know how to pour coffee. I know how to manage my mother's prescriptions. I don't know how to run a foundation." "You know what it's like to be poor," he countered, his gaze intense. "You know what it's like to be invisible. I can hire 1,000 accountants. Lena, I can't hire your heart. I can't hire from your experience. You won't just be signing checks. You will be finding the people we left behind, the Lilies, the Eleanors. You will be the one who sees them." She took to the role with a quiet, fierce determination. She used her story, the one that was now public, to inspire others, to show them that they were not forgotten. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was the conscience of the new DeLuca empire, the living proof of its transition from violence to protection. As Marco had planned, the Romano family, decapitated of its leadership and exposed by the federal investigation, collapsed. Internal betrayals, driven by fear and greed, finished what Marco had started. The threat was neutralized, not just for Lena, but for the entire city. But one thread remained loose. Lena sat in Marco's office. Months later, she was going through their father's old, leather-bound journals, part of her work to understand the family's history. She was looking for old charitable contacts, but she found something else. Tucked into the back of a 1999 ledger was a name, written over and over, with a frantic, angry energy. Senator Davies, he knows. He threatened. The girl. Leverage. Senator Davies, The man Marco had shoved to the ground at the gala, the same man who, according to the file, had been one of the first and most corrupt of Romano's political assets. She showed it to Marco. This doesn't make sense. If Davies was with the Romanos, why would my father be afraid of him? Why would he call Lena leverage? Marco's face, which had been relaxed, settled into a familiar, cold mask. He picked up the phone. Antonio, find Senator Davies, the retired Senator Davies. I don't care where he is. I don't care if he's on a golf course in Maui. I want to know where he sleeps. Tonight. They found him in a quiet, gated community in Florida, living on a pension that was far too small to pay for the house he was in. Marco flew them down on a private jet, Lena had protested, but he was firm. This is your past, Lena, not mine. You need to see this. You need to close the last door. They didn't come with guards. They just came as a brother and a sister. They walked up to the pristine, white suburban home and rang the bell. An old, frail man with watery, terrified eyes answered the door. He saw Marco, and his face, tan and leathery, went white as a sheet. DeLuca. If I don't, what is this? Hello, Senator, Marco said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble that was far more terrifying than any shout. We're here to talk about a 20-year-old debt. He pushed past the man, guiding Lena into the cool, air-conditioned living room. I paid you. I gave them everything, Davies stammered, backing away. This isn't about them, Marco said. He gestured to Lena. Do you know who this is? The senator looked at Lena, at her dark hair, her strong jaw, her eyes, the DeLuca eyes. He collapsed onto his expensive sofa. Oh, God, it can't be. She's dead. The fire. Who was she, Senator? Lena asked, her voice quiet, but it cut through the room. Who was the woman in the photos, the one who sold the ring? A staffer, Davies whispered, his face in his hands. A woman I was involved with. She was unstable. She worked in my office. She heard things. What did she hear? Marco demanded, his voice dropping. Your father. Davies cried, looking up, his eyes pleading. Not the Romanos. It was your father. He was a monster. He was planning to use your sister as leverage. To force a vote on a new dock contract, he was going to arrange a kidnapping himself and blame the Romanos to start a war. He was going to use his own 5-year-old daughter. Lena's blood ran cold. She looked at Marco. His face was unreadable. My staffer, the woman she loved, your sister, Davies continued, the words spilling out. She was a nanny. Sometimes. She heard the plan. She couldn't let it happen. She took Lena to save her. She came to me, frantic, needing money to disappear. I gave her everything I had. I sold the ring she gave me. To cover my tracks. I thought she'd be safe. The fire, Lena breathed. I heard about it. That an unnamed woman and a child had died. I assumed your father had found them and had cleaned up the mess. The room was silent. The woman in the photo wasn't a kidnapper. She was a savior, and she had died for it. You, Marco said, his voice a low, lethal hiss, let this shadow hang over my family. You let us believe a lie. You let the Romanos take the blame while you sat here, safe, on blood money. What are you going to do? Davies whispered, shrinking. He was looking at Marco. He was looking for a gun. My sister, Marco said, his voice cold, is at the head of the DeLuca Foundation. We are re-evaluating our family's history. We are dedicated to the truth. He pulled a small digital recorder from his pocket. You are going to give a full, public confession. You are going to tell the world what my father tried to do, and you are going to tell them about the woman who saved his daughter. You are going to clear her name, and you are going to clear my sister's. It was a brilliant, bloodless execution. 2 days later, the confession of Senator Davies was the lead story on every news channel. It painted a picture of a desperate man, haunted by his past, finally coming clean. It cleared all the remaining shadows around Lena's identity, and it cemented the image of the new DeLuca family, one that dealt in truth, not in bullets. A week later, Lena found herself standing on the steps of St. Jude's, the church where Maria had found the necklace. It was a cool, autumn evening, the air crisp. She held the small silver teardrop locket in her palm. It was heavy. It was the key. It was the anchor. It was the thing that had tethered her to a past she didn't know and guided her to a future she could never have imagined. She had found Maria, had thanked her, had ensured the kind. Old woman would never have to work another day in her life. She looked at the locket. It had been her. Lily's. Only beautiful thing. It was Lena's first. She placed it gently on the top step, where the light from the stained glass window would catch it in the morning. She didn't leave a note. She didn't need to. Its journey was over. Hers was just beginning. She turned and walked back to the car, where Marco was waiting, the door open. He didn't ask. He just took her hand, and they drove home. The story ends, as so many do, with a sunset. They were on the balcony of the penthouse, the one that had once been her gilded cage and was now just home. The sky over Port Veritas was a breathtaking, painted slash of orange and purple and deep, velvety blue. Lena, her arm no longer in a sling, her scars a pale, silvery whisper, stood close to him. She reached up, her hand resting over his heart, feeling the slow, steady beat that was her anchor. "You didn't lose me," she whispered, her voice quiet in the vastness of the evening. "All those years I was never really lost. You were always the one who would find me." Marco turned, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her flush against him. He kissed her temple, a kiss of profound, absolute peace. He breathed in the scent of her hair, the scent of home. "And I'll never lose you again," he murmured, his voice a vow as the last sliver of the sun disappeared and the city lights below, their city, began to glitter, one by one, like a carpet of fallen stars. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We hope it captured your imagination. We would be absolutely thrilled if you'd let us know where you're listening from. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Please, if you enjoyed this, consider subscribing to our channel, Mafia Romance Stories, so you never miss an update. And finally, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What did you think of Lena's journey? And Marco's transformation? Your feedback means the world to us. Thank you for being here.